Lesson 2.3, Working Planes. In this lesson, you will learn what a working plane is. You will learn how to create working planes, you will learn how to save and restore working planes, and you will learn how to use working planes to control object creation. Back to Vectorworks. Open the exercise Lesson 2.3 from your exercise folder. If you've forgotten to download the exercise folder, return back to Lesson 1 where you'll see a link to download your exercises. There's a whole set of folders. There's completed, there's imperial, and there are metric exercises folders. So that's on the very first lesson. There's a link to download those. Open Lesson 2.3. Here it is here. We haven't spoken about layer plane, screen plane, or working plane yet. So it's now time for us to talk about those because these are fundamental for your 3D creation. We have a pull-down menu here which controls our planes. We've got layer plane, screen plane, and we should look at our options. Now the options here allow us to use screen plane only, working plane only, or both screen plane and working plane. So I'd like you to choose this option here. So what is screen plane? Well, if I go up here first and I'll choose screen plane. Now when I create a rectangle, it is stuck to the back of my screen, stuck to the back of my monitor. When I use my flyover tool and turn the view round, you'll notice that my 3D model moves, but not my screen plane object. So I'm just going to delete that. Next, I'd like to look at layer plane. So when I create something on the layer plane, it's like it's drawn on the ground. When I turn my view round, you notice it moves with my 3D object, and so it's drawn on the ground or it's stuck to the ground, and I move around and it moves with the bottom of the layer. I'll delete that one as well. We have another option that we can play with. Let's go to our 3D modeling tool set over here, and we want to look at this tool called the Set Working Plane tool. Now there are two options with this tool. The first option here is for 3-point mode. So we click here, then we click there, and then we click there, and it creates a working plane with our first click as the center of our working plane. Now that can be a little bit complicated to understand. This one is a lot easier to understand, the planar face mode, where we just click on a face and it sets a working plane to the face of that object. And you can see there's that rather pinky purpley colored object, which is our working plane. So I'll just go over that again. The first one, the center is the start of my working plane, or the origin of my working plane. So I want that to go one direction, and I want the other one to go that direction, and so that is my X direction was my first 2 clicks, the Y direction is my second 2 clicks, and of course the Z or the Z is perpendicular to the plane. So let's just go back up here and we'll choose layer plane again. So I'm going to use my Set Working Plane tool. In the second mode, which I find a lot easier to use, it actually finds an object and it snaps to an object, and you can snap to centers, you can snap to midpoints, and if I click there, Vectorworks has found the center of that plane, center of that object, and it's now created a working plane directly on the center of that object. If I right click away from everything, I can go to working plane and I can choose save working plane. So I can save this and I can give it a name like left. So that stores my working plane for me. Let's go to the top. You see it highlights in blue. I find the center, I click, right click away from everything. Let's go to working plane and we'll save our working plane, and this will be my top. And I'll create one on the front as well. So click there, right click away from everything, working plane, and save working plane. And this will be my front. So what's the point of having these? Well, the point of having them is that we can then go up here and we can go left. Let's just get out of that tool first. Back to my selection tool. So let's choose left, let's choose top, and let's choose front. So what again is the point of these things? If I draw, I am drawing on the plane of that object. If I choose the top, I can draw on the top of my object. And if I choose the left, I can draw on the left of my object. So what does that look like when I start turning my view around? I'm going to change back to my layer plane. Now if I use my control and mouse wheel button, I can turn my view and you see I've drawn directly on that object. Vectorworks has found the faces of that object, I've drawn directly on it. Very useful for complex 3D models to be able to save a working plane and come back to it and draw directly on that working plane. Window on the menu bar, palettes, and there is a working planes palette. I'll just open that up. So there was my front, there was my left, and there's my top. And I can activate these planes by double clicking. I can also right click and I can duplicate that plane, I can delete that plane, I can select it, I can edit it, and so on. When you've selected a working plane, you'll notice that you've now got a series of dots. The red dot rotates in one way, the green dots rotate another way, and the blue dots rotate in the other axis, I should call them. So we can rotate it in the X, in the Y, and in the Z axes. Once you've done that, if we rotate that to 45 degrees, or 30 degrees in this case, then you can right click, working plane, save the working plane, and you can say 30 degrees. So that's my front at 30 degrees. So I can go to that one, I can go to my front, or I can go to my 30 degree at the front. So it becomes quite a powerful way of managing the 3D working environment. If you want to get rid of one of these, you can right click and you can delete that working plane. Delete that one as well. So you can go through and you can save and you can delete. I'm just going to undo that to put that one back, and we'll activate the front. And there's my layer plane. Now I can understand if you find this a little bit tricky, but it is important that you go through this and you learn how to use working planes. They become extremely useful for your 3D modeling. I'd like to go to the rectangle tool, and I'd like to click on this pull down menu, and we have our left, we have our top, we have our front, we've been through screen plane, we've been through our options. We haven't talked about automatic. Let me choose automatic. So we can actually toggle this by using the backslash key on the keyboard. So I'm going to turn this off because I don't want to see that message again. So I now have automatic working plane. Now what this does is it sort of gets us around having to create these working planes for ourselves. So it short circuits that whole point. If we go near an object, you can see it's highlighted in blue, exactly the same as when we had our set working plane tool. Click, draw a rectangle there. Now I can draw one there, and now I can draw one here. So it becomes a really quick way to draw if we use our working planes. And if I turn my view, you can clearly see that I've drawn on the face of my object, and it was really quick, and I didn't have to save the working planes. But I needed to show you what working planes were before we could use the automatic. So I'm going to select all of this and delete it, because what I'd like to show you is how quickly you could make that bollard again if we used automatic working planes. So I'm going to use my rectangle tool, I'm going to use it from the center mode, and I'm going to start at the page center, and I'm going to come out. Now you might remember, in this case I'm using millimeters. It was 150 millimeters last time, which half that would be 75. So I'm using the mode where I only need to be at the center and have half the size of my rectangle. And this was 650, enter, enter. So let's zoom so we can see all our objects. So now I can click here, I can create that other part, which was 2 inches, or 50 millimeters. 50 millimeters again, enter, enter again, click, let's pull that up, 50 millimeters, enter, enter. Now I can create this top part here, so from that center, line up with that point, click up here, this was 150, enter, enter. And this was a much quicker way of creating that bollard than the previous time. I'll just click on this button here so that we fit to objects. So I hope you found that was a much quicker way of drawing your bollard this time round than the previous time. Save your file. It's quite handy to save this file, and I'm just going to save my file and move on to the next exercise. This is the end of lesson 2.3. In this lesson, you learned what a working plane is. You learned how to create working planes. You learned how to save and restore working planes. And you learned how to use working planes to control object creation.